in the rolling hills of central Italy, before the grandeur of Rome cast its shadow across the Mediterranean world. A civilization emerged that would quietly lay the foundations for one of history's greatest empires. The Etruscans, flourishing between the 8th and 3rd centuries BCE, remain one of the ancient world's most enigmatic yet profoundly influential societies. Their name has faded from popular memory, eclipsed by the very civilization they helped create, yet their cultural imprint reverberates through the centuries, embedded in the DNA of Western civilization itself. This was a people who mastered the art of civic organization, architectural innovation, and social sophistication, at a time when much of Europe remained shrouded in tribal uncertainty. The Etruscan homeland, known as Etruria, stretched across what is today Tuscany, Umbria, and Lazio, a landscape blessed with fertile agricultural lands and rich mineral deposits that would become the lifeblood of their prosperity. From approximately 800 BCE, these people began constructing a network of 12 independent city-states, each functioning as a sovereign entity yet bound together by shared cultural practices, language, and social customs. Unlike the militaristic expansion that would characterize later Roman society, the Etruscan Confederation operated through a delicate balance of autonomy and cooperation, a political structure that would inform the later development of Roman civic organization. These city-states, including prominent centers like Tarquinia, Cerveteri, and Voci, became thriving hubs of commerce, craftsmanship, and cultural exchange. Their wealth derived from the systematic exploitation of iron, copper, and tin deposits that lay beneath the Etruscan hills. The social fabric of Etruscan civilization was woven through the primacy of family and kinship, a structural foundation that defined every aspect of public and private life. From the earliest archaeological evidence, we observe the careful organization of cemeteries into distinct family groups, each kin unit maintaining its own necropolis as a permanent marker of lineage and social identity. This was not mere burial practice, but a profound statement about the organizing principles of Etruscan society, where one's position in the social hierarchy derived directly from familial connections and hereditary status. By the 7th and 6th centuries BCE, the emergence of large, elaborately constructed stone tombs signals the crystallization of a wealthy elite class. Their monumental burial chambers, filled with precious grave goods that proclaim their elevated status even in death. At sites like Cerveteri, these tombs were arranged in orderly grid patterns, creating entire cities for the dead that mirrored the urban planning principles of the living world, complete with streets, squares, and hierarchical organization. The prosperity that enabled this social stratification emerged from Etruria as strategic position at the crossroads of Mediterranean trade networks and its systematic exploitation of natural resources. Etruscan merchants became renowned throughout the ancient world for their exports of metalwork, pottery, and wine, establishing commercial relationships that stretched from the Greek colonies of Magna Graecia to the Phoenician trading posts of the Western Mediterranean. The manufacture of bucero, ware, a distinctive black pottery that became synonymous with Etruscan craftsmanship, represented not only artistic achievement, but also the sophisticated organization of specialized workshops and trade guilds. Vine cultivation and wine production, documented from at least the 6th century BCE, transformed the Etruscan landscape and economy. With amphora, manufacturing centers producing vessels that would carry Etruscan wine across the Tyrrhenian and broader Mediterranean seas. This economic vitality created a merchant class of considerable wealth and influence, expanding the ranks of the elite beyond traditional tribal leaders to encompass successful traders, workshop owners, and agricultural entrepreneurs. Etruscan cities themselves represented remarkable achievements in urban planning and civic architecture, innovations that would profoundly influence Roman building practices. The Etruscans pioneered the use of the arch and vault in Mediterranean architecture, structural elements that would become hallmarks of Roman engineering prowess. Their temples, built on high platforms and approached by monumental staircases, established an architectural language that communicated power, permanence, and civic pride. These structures were adorned with colorfully painted terracotta antefixes and decorative fittings, transforming religious and public buildings into vibrant displays of artistic skill and cultural values. The Etruscan innovation of hydraulic engineering, including sophisticated drainage systems and water management infrastructure, addressed the practical challenges of urban life while demonstrating an advanced understanding of civil engineering principles. When Rome later became famous for its aqueducts, sewers, and public fountains, it was building upon foundations laid by Etruscan engineers who had already mastered these technologies centuries earlier. The archaeological record reveals that Etruscan society afforded women a status markedly different from that of their Greek and later Roman counterparts, a social characteristic that astonished contemporary observers and continues to intrigue modern scholars. Funerary art frequently depicts married couples reclining together on sarcophagi, suggesting a partnership model of marriage rather than the patriarchal dominance typical of other Mediterranean societies. Women's names appear in inscriptions alongside their own familial lineage, not merely as appendages to their husbands' identities, indicating legal and social recognition of female personhood and inheritance rights. The tomb paintings show women participating in banquets, social gatherings, and public events with a freedom of movement and social interaction that scandalized Greek observers who were accustomed to the strict seclusion of women in their own culture. This relative gender equality extended into economic life, where evidence suggests women could own property, conduct business transactions, and exercise legal agency in ways foreclosed to women in neighboring societies. Daily life among the Etruscan elite, as reconstructed from tomb paintings and archaeological remains, centered on elaborate social rituals and public displays of wealth and refinement. Greek historians like Posidonios describe the legendary luxury of the Etruscan table, where twice-daily feasts featured embroidered tablecloths, abundant silver vessels, and numerous servants attending to the needs of their masters. These banquets were not merely occasions for consumption, but served as crucial venues for the performance of social status, the cultivation of political alliances, and the transmission of cultural values. The walls of aristocratic tombs preserve vivid scenes of these gatherings, showing musicians playing double flutes and lyres, dancers performing elaborate choreographies, and guests engaging in animated conversation, all painted in the distinctive Etruscan style that combine realistic detail with stylized composition. These images provide invaluable glimpses into a social world where leisure, entertainment, and conspicuous consumption mark the boundaries of elite identity and reinforce the hierarchical structures of Etruscan society. Etruscan artistic production reached extraordinary heights of technical skill and aesthetic sophistication, particularly in three media that would become synonymous with their cultural achievement: terracotta sculpture, bronze casting, and wall painting. The use of terracotta for large-scale figurative sculpture, including life-sized figures adorning temples and elaborate sarcophagi lids, represented a distinctive choice that set Etruscan art apart from the marble-focused traditions of Greece. These terracotta works captured the physical characteristics and expressions of their subjects with remarkable naturalism, creating portraits that feel startlingly immediate even across millennia. Etruscan emphasis on realism and attention to detail produced artworks that documented the actual appearance of their society, preserving hairstyles, clothing, jewelry, and physical features with an accuracy that serves as invaluable historical evidence. Bronze casting achieved levels of refinement that made Etruscan bronzes famous throughout the ancient world, though relatively few large examples survive because the valuable metal was systematically recycled by later civilizations. The bronzes that do remain, depicting warriors in dynamic poses and decorated with intricate details, demonstrate mastery of lost wax casting techniques and an aesthetic sensibility that balanced anatomical accuracy with stylized elegance. The organization of Etruscan civic life revolved around public spaces and communal institutions that fostered social cohesion while reinforcing hierarchical distinctions. Large temples and public platforms created focal points for civic gatherings, festivals, and administrative functions, physically manifesting the relationship between political authority and the urban community. The layout of Etruscan cities, with their orderly street plans and distinct neighborhoods, reflected conscious urban design principles that balanced practical considerations of defense, commerce, and daily movement with symbolic statements about social organization. Public buildings featured the distinctive Etruscan architectural style, characterized by wide temple fronts, deep porches supported by columns, and steep pitched roofs adorned with elaborate terracotta decorations that proclaimed civic wealth and cultural sophistication. These urban spaces served as stages for the performance of civic identity, where festivals, markets, athletic competitions, and public ceremonies brought the community together in shared experiences that transcended individual family loyalties, while simultaneously reinforcing the social hierarchy through privileged access and prominent display. Etruscan influence on early Rome cannot be overstated, for it was through direct Etruscan rule and sustained cultural contact that the small Latin settlement on the Tiber transformed into a city capable of eventual Mediterranean dominance. Between 616 and 509 BCE, Rome was governed by a series of Etruscan kings who fundamentally reshaped the settlement's physical infrastructure, political institutions, and cultural identity. These rulers drained the marshy valley that would become the Roman Forum, constructed the first stone temples and public buildings, and established the civic and administrative frameworks that would survive the eventual expulsion of the monarchy. The legendary reforms attributed to Servius Tullius, including the reorganization of Roman society into census classes and the establishment of territorial tribes, represented Etruscan innovations in civic organization that Rome would maintain and develop throughout its republican and imperial history. Many of Rome's most prominent patrician families traced their ancestry to Etruscan origins, and even after the establishment of the Roman Republic, Etruscan-descended families continued to play crucial roles in Roman political life. The cultural transmission from Etruria to Rome extended into virtually every aspect of Roman civilization, creating a palimpsest where Roman innovations were layered over Etruscan foundations. The Latin alphabet itself derived from the Etruscan script, which the Etruscans had adapted from Greek models, creating the writing system from which nearly all modern European alphabets ultimately descend. Roman clothing traditions, including the iconic toga with its purple border denoting magisterial status, originated in Etruscan dress customs that used specific garments and colors to mark social rank and public office. The gladiatorial games, perhaps the most famous and infamous of Roman spectacles, began as Etruscan funerary customs where armed combat honored the deceased and provided entertainment for funeral attendees. As Rome incorporated these practices, it transformed them in scale and meaning. But the Etruscan origins remained embedded in the rituals and symbolic language that surrounded these distinctively Roman institutions. Etruscan contributions to Roman civic and administrative culture proved equally foundational, establishing templates that would shape Roman governance for centuries. The organization of the Roman army, with its distinctive formation and command structure, derived from Etruscan military innovations. The practice of divination and augury, central to Roman public decision-making, came directly from Etruscan expertise in interpreting natural phenomena as guides for human action. Urban planning principles, including the orientation of cities and the designation of sacred and civic spaces, followed Etruscan precedents that Rome adapted and even the Roman calendar, which through Julius Caesar's reforms would become the basis for the modern Western calendar, owed its fundamental structure to Etruscan astronomical observations and timekeeping systems. In countless ways, both obvious and subtle, the civilization that Romans would eventually conquer and absorb had already shaped the essential character of Roman culture itself. The rhythms of Etruscan public life pulsed to the cadence of an elaborate ceremonial calendar that structured the year through recurring festivals, games, and communal celebrations that bound society together and marked the passage of seasons and agricultural cycles. The Etruscan calendar, inherited from astronomical observations and refined through generations of careful observation, divided the year into distinct periods, each associated with specific public ceremonies that gathered the urban population in collective experiences designed to reinforce social bonds, display civic wealth, and demonstrate the proper ordering of the community. These were not private devotional practices, but spectacular public performances, theatrical productions in the truest sense, where society literally staged itself and performed its own internal hierarchies and values before assembled crowds. The Spring New Year, celebrated in March, according to Etruscan reckoning, initiated a comprehensive cycle of purification, rituals, and renewal ceremonies that prepared the community psychologically and socially for the agricultural season ahead. These inaugural celebrations established a template of structured performance that would characterize Etruscan civic life throughout the year, with each major seasonal transition marked by processions, animal sacrifices, communal feasting, and athletic competition. The harvest festivals, particularly those honoring Fuplins, the deity associated with vegetation and agricultural abundance, transformed Etruscan cities into scenes of vibrant public celebration, where thousands of citizens and slaves moved through the streets in elaborate processions depicted in tomb paintings that preserve the visual memory of these occasions. Contemporary observers noted that these Etruscan harvest celebrations were characterized by an exuberance and sensory intensity that distinguished them from the more austere and formal ceremonies of neighboring cultures. Processions wound through city streets lined with crowds, with musicians leading the way while carried offerings of produce, wine, and livestock moved toward designated temple spaces where ritualists would perform the formal acts of sacrifice and supplication that the occasion demanded. The organization of these processions reflected the careful hierarchical structuring of society, with participants arranged by social rank and family affiliation, ensuring that the public spectacle itself became a demonstration of the social order and one's place within it. Merchants, artisans, agricultural workers, and enslaved populations all occupied their assigned positions within the ceremonial apparatus, each category of person visible and acknowledged as a component part of the integrated whole. Athletic competition formed perhaps the most celebrated and participatory dimension of Etruscan public culture, with games and contests appearing regularly throughout the ceremonial calendar and drawing vast audiences to designated athletic spaces within cities or in specialized venues constructed for sporting events. The Etruscans demonstrated a remarkable sophistication in their development of athletic infrastructure, constructing specialized facilities that accommodated both competitors and spectators, with permanent or semi-permanent structures designed specifically for chariot racing, foot races, wrestling, boxing, and other competitive events. Chariot racing achieved particular prominence in Etruscan athletic culture, becoming the signature sport that drew enthusiastic participation from the aristocratic elite and commanded passionate attention from crowds whose loyalty to particular toiled. It's a loyalty's coiled, it's a loyalty and peels. It is fiends of its card, it is semiskin. When it is part, it's but and without it is there that with the two. It do it with the to with the two, the with though it the races themselves unfolded as spectacular performances, with richly decorated chariots drawn by carefully trained horses, drivers dressed in distinctive garments and colors that identified their team affiliations, and crowds arranged in viewing areas organized by social status. The commemoration of athletic victories in art and monumental display signals that successful athletes achieved significant status and social elevation through their competitive achievements, much as later Roman athletes would become celebrated fluents, much as leches and sats, it's line, side, sats, that's it's and but it's will, or, where, with a 10, with that, but what the seg would do with air would one with tut, what Beyond chariot racing, Etruscan athletic culture encompassed a comprehensive repertoire of competitive forms that transformed public spaces into arenas of human struggle and physical display. Wrestling and boxing featured prominently in Etruscan games, with depictions in tomb art showing competitors engaged in intense combat, often supervised by officials who enforced rules and determined winners. These combat sports, far from being brutal exhibitions without structure or regulation, operated according to established protocols and rules that governed acceptable techniques and determined outcomes according to established procedures. These sporting contests served multiple functions simultaneously. They provided entertainment and public spectacle. They offered opportunities for young aristocratic males to display their physical prowess and competitive spirit. They reinforced the hierarchical status of spectator. They reinforced it points. Bacatator, bantaporte, Bishan corns connets and points is cat. One, what is it? It is it's born, but it's been but, there's a war. Yes, to that do work, we'll have what if to have to work, whatever, with or what, with all, work, swore, go, stuck up, but stuck, this is what and they created celebrated champions whose victories could elevate family prestige and social standing across generations. The construction of permanent sporting facilities and the regular scheduling of athletic events demonstrate that these were not occasional amusements but fundamental institutions of Etruscan civic culture embedded in the ceremonial calendar and the operation of urban society. Foot races and jumping competitions rounded out the athletic repertoire available to Etruscan competitors and audiences. With these events drawing participants from across the Confederation and creating opportunities for individual athletes to achieve renown and status through victory. The organization of these athletic competitions reveals sophisticated understanding of spectacle management and crowd control. With officials designated to judge competitions fairly, enforce rules, and determine victors according to established protocols. The prizes awarded to successful competitors, documented in inscriptions and artistic depictions, ranged from material rewards of considerable value to public honors and commemorations that secured lasting fame and social elevation. Victorious athletes became celebrated public figures whose achievements were memorialized in art and whose names were transmitted across generations through the records of competition, victories, and the acclaim of their communities. This athletic culture, which so impressed and influenced the Romans who absorbed Etruscan sporting traditions into their own civilization, represents a critical component of Etruscan social life and public performance. Music and dance constituted equally essential dimensions of Etruscan public culture, serving as the accompaniment to virtually every significant social occasion and ceremonial event that brought the community together. The double flute, or aulos, emerged as the signature Etruscan instrument, appearing frequently in tomb frescoes and artistic representations where musicians are depicted performing at banquets, funeral processions, athletic competitions, and religious ceremonies. The distinctive sound of the paired pipes, one for melody and one for accompaniment or rhythmic drone, created the auditory backdrop for much of Etruscan public life, and contemporary observers noted that Etruscans seemed to move through their social world in constant accompaniment of musical performance. The lyre, borrowed from Greek tradition but adapted to Etruscan preferences and performance styles, provided another crucial musical element. appearing in the hands of professional musicians and aristocratic amateurs and elitocratic amateurs and aristocratic amatrates, aristocratic, recidocratian, musicrens fricanic, that is Ritzcrap that, it is since Quart King, but it's but, it, we will, I heard, what the poor have what the well, what the The salpinx, a bronze trumpet used for signaling and ceremonial announcement, conveyed authority and commanded attention at public gatherings, military assemblies, and important civic moments. The performers themselves, typically enslaved or of humble origin, though sometimes freeborn professionals, achieved a curious status as essential participants in elite social life, despite their social subordination. They appeared in domestic contexts, performing for the entertainment of aristocratic households. They led processions and public ceremonies. They provided accompaniment for athletic competitions, and they were essential components of funerary spectacles that honored the dead. The tomb frescoes preserve images of musicians dressed in distinctive garments, often shown with distinctive physical characteristics that mark them as professional performers, their bodies and faces identifiable as those who spent their lives in musical practice and public performance. These artistic representations provide invaluable evidence about performance styles, instrument construction, and the integration of music into virtually every significant social occasion in Etruscan civilization. Dancing, intimately connected to musical performance and featuring prominently in tomb paintings and sculptural representations, provides insight into Etruscan physical culture and the aesthetic values of bodily movement and expression. The depictions show dancers engaged in elaborate choreographies, moving with fluid grace and dynamic energy that conveys professional skill and long training. Both male and female dancers appear in these representations, sometimes performing before elite audiences, sometimes participating in ceremonial contexts, and sometimes engaged in what ancient observers perceived as uninhibited movement and provocative display. The remarkable freedom with which Etruscan society permitted female dancers to perform publicly, displaying their bodies through movement and participating in ceremonial activities with suitably scandalized through meeting and participating is scandalized exabranist scandalize, candelides, condable that convendicestives, convasitutant, that is axer to whip to buit him, but, the but, with the heart, at the with the but, the put wall. It with what that with our cool with Yet among the Etruscans, this public participation in music and dance appears to have been consistent with broader patterns of female social integration and public prominence. The great banquets that featured throughout Etruscan aristocratic life represented perhaps the most elaborate and carefully orchestrated of all Etruscan public performances, bringing together music, dance, food, drink, and social hierarchy in elaborate ceremonial displays that consumed vast resources and demonstrated the wealth and status of host families. According to Greek observers who documented these events with fascination and disapproval, the Etruscan banquet could extend for hours, with multiple courses of elaborately prepared food accompanied by fine wines served in precious vessels by attendants in livery. The participants reclined on cushioned couches, arranged around tables laden with delicacies, a dining posture and practice borrowed from Greek models, but transformed through Etruscan elaboration and the distinctive practice of including women as equal participants in the banqueting experience. The inclusion of women in these public social events distinguished Etruscan practice from both Greek and Roman customs, where respectable women were excluded from the male-dominated world of formal dining and public sociability. This integration of women into elite social occasions, particularly during the classical and Hellenistic periods of Etruscan civilization, roughly 600 to 340 BCE, represented one of the most distinctive and remarked upon features of Etruscan society that would ultimately be transformed and restricted as Roman cultural practices became dominant. The walls of Etruscan tombs, particularly those in Tarquinia's Monterazzi necropolis, preserve exquisite fresco paintings depicting these elaborate banquets in vivid detail, with multiple courses of food, musicians performing, attendants serving wine, and guests engaged in animated conversation and entertainment. These painted scenes are not merely decorative embellishments, but serve as visual documentation of actual social practices and the material culture that structured elite life. The careful attention to detail in rendering clothing, jewelry, hairstyles, and facial features provides ethnographic data about actual Etruscan appearance and fashion, while the compositional arrangements and hierarchical positioning of figures within the scenes communicate implicit messages about social order and relationships. The prominence of coupled figures in many of these scenes. The prominence of couples is the prominence with husbands, with his scenes, with husbands, with physicians, positions to accretion, pornis. Connebrations, cornices, condorations, coordinations, or aneborederants, and the bodits quad, norns, it is stinctual, and what to quad, sigh, cooput, kawit, but, but that one, quen, or there, and what to, it's if that is then do, with that, what with, it what it's good, what, come there, Botanical flourishing in the late 7th and early 6th centuries BCE emerged as one of the most celebrated figures in Etruscan history, precisely because she moved with confidence through elite political and social spaces during the critical period when Etruscan kings governed Rome, participating in decision-making and wielding considerable influence through her intelligence, strategic acumen, and social standing. According to historical sources, preserved by later Roman authors, Tanacle demonstrated political awareness and divination expertise, receiving omens that predicted the ascendancy of her husband Lucamo, who would become known as Lucius Tarquinius Priscus and would rule Rome as one of its most significant early kings. Her ability to appear publicly, her opinions, her indulgence, own prudence Leo, and product its own pronities, own prinity, and pertilituli and pertilitulus in Italico and Italian panicula. Its indilia, initiator, insituatu, insitua, initur, tuit tichug, insituit, its pora, in its buying in bud, its important, on to wit pititue, itatua, with here we will say, if there, with we will, before we will, with what with the war with The traditions preserving her memory even into the later Roman imperial period attest to the enduring significance of her life and achievements. Even as Roman authors reshaped and sometimes distorted her legacy for their own narratives, they nonetheless preserved evidence of her political importance and autonomous agency. Velia Spurinna, living in the later phases of Etruscan history, represented another towering female figure of political prominence who exercised significant authority despite the progressive Romanization of Etruscan territories that was restricting female autonomy and subordinating women to Roman cultural norms. Her prominence during the transition period between Etruscan independence and Roman dominance roughly the 4th to 3rd centuries BCE, demonstrates that exceptional women could exercise significant authority and influence in Etruscan society, even as political conditions were fundamentally transforming, wielding power in ways foreclosed to their counterparts in other Mediterranean civilizations. The documentation of her achievements in surviving inscriptions and historical accounts provides evidence that aristocratic Etruscan women maintained access to power and authority even as their civilization underwent authority even as their civilization underlizates. In authorities settlers sandes. It is sty, was, sans it's out, that bends, that bits in, but it's bets it's wood but, with what, it's if though, do, if it is with the two, though, what, the, or what, us, what could do us talk was all her life and achievements stand as testimony to the resilience of Etruscan cultural patterns around female autonomy even under conditions of external pressure and political conquest. The material culture surrounding Etruscan female life, as preserved in archaeological remains from tombs and domestic contexts, reveals sophisticated consumer aesthetics and access to luxury goods that signaled elevated status. The elaborate jewelry recovered from elite female burials, gold fibulae, intricate necklaces, earrings fashioned with remarkable technical skill indicates both the wealth available to aristocratic women and the value placed on personal adornment and display as markers of social position. The mirrors, some engraved with scenes of significance and crafted from highly polished bronze, provided not merely functional objects but luxurious possessions that combine practical utility with artistic achievement. The containers for cosmetics and perfumed oils, fashioned from ivory, alabaster, and precious stones, demonstrate the development of sophisticated beauty practices among Etruscan women and the availability of luxury goods that supported elaborate grooming and personal care regimens. These material remains preserve the physical traces of an elite female life, markedly more visible, autonomous, and publicly engaged than that of women in neighboring civilizations. The evolution of women's status across the long span of Etruscan civilization reveals important transitions in social organization and gender relations that responded to broader historical changes and external influences. During the earliest Villanovan period, when Etruscan civilization was still in its formative phases, archaeological evidence suggests a relatively egalitarian partnership between men and women, with grave goods indicating gender-specific roles, yet without marked hierarchy or dominance. As Etruscan civilization developed and wealth accumulated in the hands of hereditary aristocratic families, between the 8th and 6th centuries BCE, women of elite status gained increasing prominence and autonomy. Their wealth and property holdings documented in burial assemblages that matched those of elite males in richness and value. The Orientalizing period, when contact with Greek civilization and Pelcharis, when contact, the Orientalize and Culturis, civilization pluralization of lelisatial, inituards, Laertive natues, reditoration, yet the actual, yet os, but the actual and yet atu, eschwit the catual, prat to pierce the wit to the predit, it but bun bat but well, of but, well, and well has a and a word, we to well, with the far, with work, with the tsula. By the archaic and classical periods, the evidence in tomb frescoes and funerary sculpture shows women reclining at banquets beside their husbands, attending athletic competitions, dancing at public events, and participating in ceremonial processions with a public visibility and social integration that Greek observers found shocking and immoral. The gradual Romanization of Etruscan territory, beginning systematically around the 4th century BCE and accelerating through the 3rd century as Roman military conquest extended across central Italy, brought profound changes in women's status and social possibilities. As Etruscan political autonomy disappeared and their territory was absorbed into the expanding Roman state following the final conquest of Etruscan cities, aristocratic Etruscan women experienced progressive loss of the freedoms and authority they had previously enjoyed. The onomastic evidence preserved in inscriptions shows the transition vividly. The practice of Etruscan women retaining their birth names and transmitting matrilineal identity even after marriage gave way to the Roman practice of women taking feminized versions of their husbands' family names. Visible shifts in naming conventions that marked the impositions of patriarchal Roman systems on market visible sizable, matriarchator, morlicararchus, Simpson, Wari. Since that cinches it, but with it to but of as a with of a what did what the well and I took to require out at the to the work what to what go what what Yet the influence did not flow entirely in one direction. Some features of Etruscan female autonomy appear to have influenced the development of Roman aristocratic women's status, with figures like Livia, the wife of Augustus, ruling 27 BCE, 214 CE, exercising political influence and advisory authority that would have been difficult for earlier Roman women but showed clear continuities with Etruscan models of female power. The material prosperity that enabled the elaborate social performances, athletic competitions, and monumental arts of Etruscan civilization rested fundamentally upon the systematic organization of craftsmanship and the development of sophisticated trade networks that connected Etruria to distant markets and sources of raw materials across the Mediterranean world. The Etruscan economy, far from being a simple agricultural arrangement of peasant producers and aristocratic consumers, represented a complex system of specialized production, market exchange, and commercial organization that demonstrates remarkable economic sophistication for the ancient world. The metallurgical industries that emerged from the exploitation of Etruria's rich deposits of copper, iron, and tin created a foundation for prosperity that attracted merchant communities, stimulated technological innovation, and transformed the landscape through systematic extraction and processing operations. The development of metalworking technologies, transmitted through families of craftsmen organized into workshop networks, created technical expertise passed down across generations and refined through constant practice and experimentation. The relationship between the aristocratic elite and the artisan class reveals important dimensions of Etruscan social organization, as wealthy families invested in craft workshops, sponsored artisan production, and benefited directly from the exchange value of manufactured goods, rather than craft production being confined to the margins of society or relegated to populations of marginal status. Archaeological evidence suggests that skilled craftspeople occupied recognized positions within Etruscan communities, their expertise valued and their labor actively sought by those seeking to accumulate and display wealth. The sponsorship of artisan workshops by aristocratic families transformed the organization of production from small-scale family enterprises into more formalized systems where the patron provided raw materials, workspace, and capital, while the craftspeople contributed technical skill and labor. This arrangement created significant economic interdependence between elite patrons and skilled producers, structuring the economy through relationships of mutual benefit and obligation rather than simple exploitation or domination, rather than otherboation and otherbosen to wonder. It is bad, it is, so it is, but, it's it, but, what, that did, too. Bronze working achieved particular prominence and prestige within Etruscan craft hierarchies, as the transformation of raw metal into finished products combined technical difficulty with high commercial value and aesthetic prestige. The Etruscan bronzesmiths developed sophisticated techniques for creating large-scale figurative sculpture, architectural ornaments, vessel forms, weapons, and decorative objects that commanded prices throughout the Mediterranean world and were particularly prized by Greek sanctuaries and wealthy consumers. The lost wax casting process, enabling the creation of complex forms with precise details, required extraordinary technical skill and deep knowledge of metallurgical properties, materials behavior, and form development. Workshops specializing in bronze production accumulated knowledge about optimal alloys, casting temperatures, cooling procedures, and surface finishing techniques that were guarded as proprietary information and transmitted through long apprenticeships and family training. The status of master bronzesmiths within their communities reflected the value and prestige of their crafts, with successful workshops becoming wealthy enterprises employing multiple craftspeople and apprentices in organized production. Goldworking emerged as an equally sophisticated and prestigious craft tradition, with Etruscan goldsmiths achieving remarkable technical mastery and aesthetic refinement in the creation of jewelry, decorative objects, and luxury items for elite consumption. The techniques of granulation and filigree, where minute spheres of gold were soldered to surfaces to create intricate decorative patterns, demanded extraordinary precision and knowledge of metallurgical properties. Etruscan goldsmiths created elaborate fibulated pins that served simultaneously as functional garments, fasteners, and status symbols, demonstrating the integration of technical skill, aesthetic sensibility, and economic value in objects that blended practical and ceremonial functions. The necklaces, earrings, and decorative plaques fashioned from gold and semi-precious stones reveal a sophisticated stones for cystic states, spatial persisticateds, spatiacated placicateds, spatial comsicary, spatial cossipor, spatial pensipal, spatial, tegarius, and course poetry, borin, wide, strary, and surrey. The wall, but to its it, but and with it's but with it to it there, if where it that with that to well with the what work with well he'll work what spot what the with no work school it's what do among individual cities developed regional specializations in precious metalworking, with Cerveteri becoming particularly renowned for goldwork that achieved such high reputation that it circulated widely throughout the Mediterranean and influenced workshop traditions in neighboring cultures. Ceramic production constituted another major dimension of Etruscan craft specialization, with distinctive boccaro ware achieving international commercial prominence through the distinctive black gloss surface that became the signature style of Etruscan pottery. The production of boccaro ware required specialized knowledge about clay sources, firing techniques, and surface finishing procedures that transformed humble clay into prestigious luxury goods recognized throughout the Mediterranean world. Tarquinia emerged as a major center for ceramic production, with potters developing sophisticated forms and surface decorations that achieved widespread commercial success. The production of storage amphorae, large ceramic vessels designed to carry wine, oil, and grain represented bulk production for commercial purposes. Yet even these functional containers were often decorated with care and produced to high standards that reflected both functional concerns and aesthetic values. The specialization of workshops, in particular ceramic forms or decorative styles, created distinctive regional variations, with collectors and consumers learning to recognize and value products from celebrated production centers. Textile production, though less archaeologically visible than metalwork or ceramics, constituted a major economic activity and source of wealth within Etruscan society. With linen and woolen fabrics produced through organized workshop systems for both domestic consumption and commercial export, the sophisticated purple dyes extracted from murex shells, available through maritime trade networks, were applied to fine linens that became highly valued luxury fabrics throughout the Mediterranean world. The production of these luxury textiles required access to expensive raw materials and technical knowledge about dyeing procedures, creating significant capital requirements and specialist expertise that were concentrated in wealthy workshop operations. The visual prominence of elaborate textiles in tomb paintings showing richly decorated garments, embroidered cushions, and dyed fabrics surrounding aristocratic figures provides evidence for the significance of textile production and consumption within elite material culture. The organization of Etruscan trade networks demonstrates remarkable commercial sophistication, with city-states functioning as nodes within broader Mediterranean exchange systems that connected them to Greek colonies, Phoenician trading communities, Egyptian markets, and distant consumers seeking Etruscan products. Each Etruscan city-state maintained its own commercial relationships and specialized in different products according to local resources and developed expertise, creating a system where internal trade between Etruscan cities complemented external trade with distant markets. Coastal cities like Cerveteri, Tarquinia, and Populonia functioned as imperial portion, where inland Etruscan products were concentrated, warehoused, and exchanged with foreign merchants bringing goods from across the Mediterranean. The port facilities at these coastal cities required significant infrastructure investment in wharves, warehouses, and administrative facilities to manage the flow of goods and organize commercial transactions. By the 6th century BCE, Etruscan merchants were exporting an impressive diversity of goods throughout Mediterranean trade networks, including wine, olive oil, grain, bronze, cauldrons, marble, stone sculpture, horsebits, inlaid ivory plaques, and the distinctive Bucero pottery that became synonymous with Etruscan commercial reputation. Etruscan wine achieved particular fame and commanded premium prices in foreign markets, with amphorae bearing Etruscan wine circulating widely throughout Greek territories and commanding prices that reflected both the quality of the product and the prestige associated with Etruscan production. The manufactured goods produced by Etruscan artisans were so highly valued that they circulated as far as Greece, Carthage, Egypt, and Spanish territories, finding their way into elite collections, finding their wakes of Gachuites, Sanctues of Centuates, Delphites, Godas Sengers, Delphites, Denda, and Dedenda, with a pen, in the same, Kenda, but, or it, in, but, if but, one, or, in, where, if that to what do, and with that, where what I would to, where would the go, what would, the presence of Etruscan manufactured goods in these sacred contexts indicates not only commercial reach, but also the prestige associated with Etruscan products, with wealthy Greeks purchasing Etruscan luxury goods to dedicate to the gods and demonstrate their refined aesthetic sensibilities and access to elite trade networks. The economic organization of Etruscan production included sophisticated systems for managing labor, distributing raw materials, and organizing the movement of finished goods to distant markets. Some evidence suggests that sanctuaries and religious institutions played important roles in the organization of production and commerce, with temples functioning simultaneously as ritual centers and economic organizations that sponsored craft production and organized trade activities. This integration of religious institutions with economic organization reveals important dimensions of Etruscan society, where ritual and commerce were not separated into distinct spheres, but rather intertwined within integrated systems of social organization. The accumulation of precious objects within temple treasuries and the dedication of manufactured goods as votive offerings created systems of wealth concentration and redistribution that reinforced hierarchical social structures while funding the institutions that reinforce it, while redistributions that reinforce it by hierarchical. The integration of Etruscan societies into the expanding Roman world initiated a gradual process of cultural transformation that unfolded across centuries and fundamentally altered the conditions of Etruscan political autonomy and cultural continuity. The Roman conquest of Etruscan territories, beginning in the 4th century BCE, with the siege of Veii, and continuing through the subjugation of remaining independent cities, by the early 3rd century BCE, eliminated Etruscan political sovereignty and incorporated their territories into the Roman state system. The process was not marked by violent cataclysm or sudden cultural obliteration, but rather unfolded through gradual integration, where Etruscan cities were progressively cities. There are Etruscanesses where Etruscably generations. There are aristocracies, and their aristocracies is aggrestocracies, and their culturocracies, and their cultures scratches, that the cacris crud, and there's a Gregory, with the prog, with to it born, we will. If we print with the tooted, we will with we would with we will with a war at we would well the quarter the fault that the initial military defeats that eliminated Etruscan political independence were followed by centuries of cultural absorption, where Roman institutional frameworks progressively replaced Etruscan administrative systems. Latin language gradually superseded Etruscan tongue, and Roman cultural practices increasingly dominated the social landscape. The Romanization of Etruscan territories manifested through multiple simultaneous processes that transformed Etruscan society from within while extending Roman political control from without. The adoption of Latin as the administrative language of former Etruscan cities, combined with its gradual emergence as the dominant language of commerce and public life, gradually displaced Etruscan from active use in contexts where it had previously been normative. By the 1st century BCE, Etruscan had become a minority language, maintained primarily by members of conservative aristocratic families and learned intellectuals who valued its connection to ancient tradition. The loss of linguistic distinctiveness operated symbolically to mark the disappearance of political autonomy and cultural independence, as the Etruscan language became increasingly associated with archaic pastness rather than present identity. Yet the cultural transmission did not flow entirely from Rome to Etruria. Rather, the fusion of Etruscan and Roman traditions created hybrid forms that combined elements of both civilizations and created distinctively Roman culture with deep Etruscan roots. The incorporation of Etruscan aristocratic families into the Roman elite structures created important continuities while simultaneously transforming the basis of their power and authority. Etruscan families with substantial property holdings and accumulated prestige found opportunities to participate in Roman political and military structures. Though within frameworks established by Roman institutions and subject to Roman ultimate sovereignty, some Etruscan families achieved considerable prominence within Roman society, with members rising to high office and wielding significant power within the Roman state. Yet the exercise of power within Roman structures necessarily implied acceptance of Roman primacy and submission to Roman institutional authority, marking an important transformation in the nature of elite autonomy compared to the pre-conquest period when Etruscan aristocrats exercised sovereign authority within their own city-states. The progressive transformation of Etruscan society following its incorporation into the Roman state extended beyond purely political and economic spheres to encompass the fundamental cultural and religious frameworks through which Etruscans organized their social experience and public ceremonial life. The Etruscan systems of public observance, the elaborate ritualistic frameworks that structured collective activities, marked seasonal transitions, and bound communities together, proved remarkably resilient, even as political autonomy dissolved, demonstrating the deep embeddedness of these cultural practices within the social fabric and their continued utility within transformed political circumstances. Rather than disappearing entirely under Roman domination, Etruscan ceremonial traditions were systematically incorporated into emerging Roman practice, adapted to new political contexts, and gradually hybridized with Roman customs to create distinctively Roman institutional forms that carried embedded Etruscan origins. This process of cultural fusion, rather than cultural erasure, reveals important dimensions of how the Romans absorbed an important, incorporate dimensions incorporate, incorporate, salad, sap and sad, to sablet, to sepua, in punsim poison, and but, it's them with, it's with egg, what his sin with, where the is there, what took it, we will, what it will, what the word, what the will, the Etruscan systems of divination and the professional expertise of haruspicism. The diviners and observers trained in reading signs from animal entrails and celestial phenomena became foundational to Roman religious practice and political decision-making processes that would endure for centuries. The haruspices specialists, trained through long apprenticeships in the meticulous examination of animal livers and the interpretation of their markings, occupied central roles within Etruscan public culture, where crucial decisions about military campaigns, political actions, and community undertakings were made only after proper divination procedures had been performed. The elaborate, ritualistic procedures for interpreting signs and omens represented not mere superstition but rather sophisticated techniques for organizing knowledge about the future and legitimizing decisions through appeal to systematic procedures believed to reveal divine intentions. When Rome absorbed this divinatory expertise, it was adopting proven institutional frameworks for decision-making that provided systematic procedures for authorizing political action and commanding public compliance to appeal to transcendent authority. The Etruscan practice of auguritha, interpretation of bird behavior, and lightning strikes as communicative signs conveying divine approval or disapproval, became embedded in Roman political procedure, with specially trained augurs becoming permanent officials whose consultation was required before major public decisions could be implemented. The organization of augurs into a formal priesthood, the establishment of standardized procedures for interpreting signs, and the creation of written records documenting patterns and precedents transformed divination into an institutionalized system that operated according to established protocols and could be taught to new generations of practitioners. This systematization was not unique to Rome. The Etruscan system had already developed comparable sophistication, with training manuals, recorded precedents, and professional standards that enabled the transmission of divinatory expertise across generations and the maintenance of consistent interpretation procedures. The Liber Lentius, an Etruscan liturgical text surviving in fragmentary form, preserves evidence of the sophisticated theological and practical knowledge contained in these training systems, revealing the comprehensive nature of Etruscan ritual knowledge that the Romans would systematically absorb. The astronomical and calendrical knowledge developed through Etruscan observational practices informed both divination procedures and the organization of agricultural and ceremonial calendars that structured social life across the seasons. The Etruscan brontoscopic calendara, systematic record of atmospheric phenomena, correlated with astrological observations, represented accumulated knowledge about weather patterns, seasonal cycles, and their relationship to human activities, creating frameworks through which communities organized their activities around predicted natural phenomena. This integration of astronomical observation, ritual timing, and practical agricultural knowledge created unified systems where religious agricultural knowledge created unified viticultural knowledge in a forces allegation and practical lisaver indikalsa seju, lissaber, selacols, selermo, denanol, intimor, inlacor, indicor, sacanacor, orchitro, all can, and but, with, wixwen to but, it will, it will, want to, or the will, with tuta will so, what's it, with the Romans inherited these calendrical and astronomical frameworks, adapting them to Roman circumstances, while preserving the fundamental principle of organizing social and political action according to divinely revealed timing communicated through systematic observation and interpretation. The transformation of Etruscan architectural knowledge into Roman building practice represents one of the most visible and enduring legacies of the cultural fusion process that followed political conquest. The Etruscan innovations in structural engineering, particularly the development of the arch, the vault, and sophisticated techniques for managing weight and creating interior space became foundational to Roman architectural achievement and enabled the monumental construction projects that would characterize Roman civilization. The arched gateway, which had become a distinctive feature of Etruscan city fortifications and monumental entrances, was adopted, refined, and transformed by Roman builders into the triumphal arched, the iconic architectural form through which Rome would memorialize military victories and proclamations of imperial power. The borrowing was not limited to structural innovations. The entire aesthetic language of Roman temple architecture derived from Etruscan precedents, including the characteristic features of temples elevated on high podiums, accessed by monumental staircases, fronted by deeply recessed porches, and adorned with elaborate terracotta decorations that conveyed wealth and civic magnificence. The Temple of Jupiter, Optimus Maximus, on the Capitoline Hill, Rome's most important early temple and center of state religion, was designed and constructed by Etruscan builders, employing Etruscan architectural principles and aesthetic traditions. The temple's plan, proportions, and decorative program directly reflected Etruscan design preferences, establishing a template that would influence Roman temple architecture for centuries to come. As Roman builders became more confident in their mastery of construction techniques and as Greek architectural influences increasingly penetrated Roman culture, they modified Etruscan models and incorporated Greek elements. Yet the fundamental structural and organizational principles remained rooted in Etruscan innovation. The atrium houses that became characteristic of Roman domestic architecture were borrowed directorist in the adeptrict, where maindorestic are words were borigins of the adapted boriging, with the reckons the obligings of the Romans sinlazings, the braining is exuberant tyriums conditioni and vigini, we is in gizing bod quiet, and it is in but tinsin, and big, and but it is simple pun bod it tap that and that and to a then to and where and in and with it to with to drift and to with to do it out well with well. You go what that was. I go what I go. I go the who with a go with the what the go with the school with the go what's good with the urban planning principles that guided Etruscan city development, including the orientation of cities according to astronomical observations, the designation of sacred precincts and profane spaces, and the hierarchical organization of neighborhoods reflecting social stratification, influenced Roman approaches to urban design and the establishment of new colonies throughout their expanding territories. When Rome embarked on its vast colonial enterprises, establishing new cities across the Mediterranean and beyond, Roman planners employed urban organizing principles inherited from Etruscan models, creating cities with characteristic elements that facilitated movement, commerce, and administration, while simultaneously communicating social order and hierarchy through spatial organization. The Olapterapitu Splapter organization, the Olidicici is servicing, semesteries, administrates, seministisle, administish sendisix, semberake, sender, Beminisik Senderson, and Beminisibur, Saxe Plisse, Quack, Puri, Sakura, and with, in, Gwe, or, and with, and will, and will, when, were, at that, what's, The absorption of Etruscan military organization and equipment by Rome transformed Roman military practice and enabled the development of the disciplined, hierarchically organized military structures that would characterize Roman conquest and administration. The Etruscan systems of organizing soldiers into ranked formations, the equipment specifications including distinctive armor and weapons, and the procedures for command and control were systematically adopted by early Rome and formed the basis upon which Roman military innovation would build. The integration of Etruscan military specialists into Roman forces and the development of procedures for training Roman soldiers according to methods refined through Etruscan practice created continuities between the military systems of the two civilizations. This military continuity was neither accidental nor coincidental. Rather, the Romans deliberately incorporated Etruscan expertise into their military establishment, recognizing that proven organizational systems could be adapted to Roman needs and circumstances. The Etruscan concept of imperium, the absolute supreme power, entrusted to a leader approved by divination and exercised through the authority granted by divine sanction, became foundational to Roman political ideology and the legitimation of executive authority. The Roman magistrate holding imperium did not merely exercise power through practical authority, but rather possessed a transcendent mandate that derived from divine approval confirmed through divination, creating a political ideology where temporal and transcendent authority were inseparably fused. This ideological framework, inherited from Etruscan political philosophy and incorporated into Roman constitutional practice, endured throughout Roman history, shaping how political authority was conceived, justified, and exercised across centuries and diverse political systems. The persistence of divination, procedures, and the consulting of augurs before major political decisions operated not as peripheral ritual but as core constitutional procedure, demonstrating the deep embeddedness of its ritual but as core constitutional demonstrations. The transmission of the Etruscan script and its transformation into the Latin alphabet represents one of the most consequential cultural inheritances, as the writing system adopted by Romans adapted from Etruscan models who had themselves adapted. Greek writing systems became the foundation for virtually all modern European alphabetic systems. The surviving Etruscan inscriptions, numbering approximately 12,000 examples, ranging from short names on grave markers to longer ritual texts like the Liber Lentius, demonstrate a literate civilization with established conventions for writing and recording information across multiple contexts. The readable but not fully comprehensible character of many Etruscan texts, where modern scholars can decode the individual letters, can decodes becomes colleges, condensized in approximates but approximate pronunciations, but oximants becomitans, exegens, with spligatics conwiticates, Witicles, and centroids, where the centroids come with, where sisictate since swag, but sang, but, to, it's bit, the fun, it, with the bat, it's it, and it's stood, and what, to, we serve with when we'll cap with, what we to it, that to a what I will with to it, to what, with our, what our, what we will, the arco, talk a war, the it's all, still is off, the war, what we back the The Roman adoption of the Etruscan script, with subsequent modifications and refinements, created a writing system that would eventually become standardized across the Roman Empire and would be inherited by Romance languages and subsequently adopted and adapted by Germanic peoples and other European cultures. The gradual displacement of Etruscan language by Latin represents a linguistic transformation that was neither sudden nor total, but rather unfolded across centuries as Latin gradually became the language of administration, commerce, and public life within formerly Etruscan territories. The process was facilitated by Roman administrative policies that privileged Latin in official contexts. The natural prestige of the language of the politically dominant power, and the practical necessity of adopting Latin for communication with non-Etruscan populations incorporated into the expanding Roman state. Yet the linguistic absorption was not unidirectional. Many Etruscan words were borrowed into Latin and subsequently transmitted to all Romance languages, preserving Etruscan linguistic elements within the language that replaced it. The decipherment of Etruscan inscriptions, an ongoing scholarly project, has revealed that many Latin religious formulae and ritual procedures derived directly from Etruscan linguistic sources, demonstrating the persistence of Etruscan cultural patterns embedded within Latin language and practice. The rediscovery of Etruscan civilization by modern archaeology, beginning in earnest during the 19th century and accelerating through systematic excavations in Tuscany during the 20th century, gradually revealed the sophistication and significance of a civilization that had faded from historical consciousness, even as its cultural imprint remained embedded throughout Roman civilization. The opening of Etruscan tombs, particularly the elaborate chamber tombs of Tarquinia, revealed extraordinary artistic treasures, including vibrant frescoes, intricate sculptures, and precious metalwork that demonstrated artistic achievement and cultural sophistication comparable to contemporaneous Greek civilization. These archaeological discoveries forced reconsideration of the historical narrative where Rome emerged almost spontaneously as a cultural narrative Revolical avolumos suelisa, Rovilicens or Avulinsens, Rochel Rolisus Silas and the Crucial Culisens Gola, and the Dotsons at that to put pussenpad, but what they were, but to would part. But that did, and will hear with Ben where with the where with there will with the foreign with that where with the where will with the listener all got what will go where will we walk walk talk The scholarly study of Etruscan civilization, initially hampered by the incomplete understanding of the language and the fragmentary nature of surviving evidence, has progressively illuminated the sophistication and importance of a civilization whose political independence was obliterated but whose cultural contributions proved enduring and formative. The recognition of Etruscan civilization's foundational importance to Roman culture represents a significant reorientation in historical understanding, revealing how the development of European civilization was not a simple narrative of Roman achievement, but rather a complex process of cultural synthesis where multiple traditions combined, fused, and transformed into hybrid forms. The Etruscans incorporated into the Roman world, not through peaceful cultural exchange, but through military conquest and political subjugation, contributed nonetheless to the development of civilization that would ultimately transform their own legacy and project their cultural influences across centuries and continents. This process of cultural transmission through politicalization that produced them but dispoliticization through produced while involization on the accordization and the subordization and subordization, paradoxization and abolization and spreadsheet and badagwats. It is the guat, it's excorks, is same pan, but proteins it's a pen, but it exists it to it that it's them when it you with the you to with that with it to if to war will and with the ticket for the will and to with it to war to war with to it's go wars go it was work with the walls but was no one Rome's expansion, accomplished through military superiority and political organization, succeeded not merely in conquering territory, but in absorbing cultural achievements and transmitting them to successor civilizations, creating channels through which ancient knowledge, artistic traditions, and social practices have been preserved and transmitted down to the present era. The transformation of Etruscan civilization from living culture to archaeological memory, from political power to cultural inheritance, represents a complex historical process that extended far beyond the simple military conquest and political subjugation that eliminated Etruscan political autonomy. The assimilation of Etruscans into the Roman world occurred gradually across centuries through mechanisms far more sophisticated than violent subjugation alone, involving the strategic establishment of Roman colonies within Etruscan territory, the selective incorporation of Etruscan aristocrats into Roman elite structures, the progressive displacement of Etruscan language by Latin, and the adaptive transformation of Etruscan cultural practices into forms that served Roman political and social purposes. The Fellis scans. The fewers, the Feligli, is the fewers things, and Phalagoan scuazins, and the Loskin spellazins, and the Loskins were in Salbus, with skewers founded with founded ballots, and besqueezing with rebants and benjit, with for prin but, and but pinqueen pin, and ben buckin, bullen but then, and the bun bun but, and pan where, and then porfin, when not the where, it were asked it up where, with it were, pep with, whatever put up, This process of cultural absorption through political conquest demonstrates how conquering civilizations often preserve and transmit the cultural achievements of the peoples they overcome, creating channels through which ancient knowledge becomes preserved within the expanding dominant civilization and ultimately transmitted to successor cultures and generations. The genetic legacy of the Etruscans, preserved in the biological inheritance of populations inhabiting territories that were once the heart of Etruscan civilization, reveals the persistence of Etruscan people even as their distinctive cultural identity became submerged within broader Roman and Italian contexts. Modern genetic analysis of ancient DNA extracted from Etruscan burials and comparative analysis with contemporary populations inhabiting Tuscany and central Italy demonstrates that modern Tuscans carry genetic signatures directly inherited from Etruscan ancestors, revealing biological continuities that persist across more than 2,000 years despite the intervening centuries of political, social, and cultural transformations. This control and cultural and cultural, this gradual, this gradual into the expandical, individual, the spatical is to the cantical, cynical, suspatical, in place of place, quays, the quitzer, and but to its core, in and it to pour and did in to and sin, one to get the and then, and well, and with it to it, with to it, with there, with the, we got at the quarter, with the more. Some the descendants of those who built the elaborate cities and created the sophisticated artistic traditions of Etruscan civilization inhabit the same Tuscan landscape where their ancestors lived. Their genetic inheritance connecting contemporary inhabitants to the deep past and anchoring modern Tuscany to its ancient heritage. The rediscovery and scholarly reclamation of Etruscan civilization during the Renaissance marked a crucial turning point in historical consciousness and the recovery of cultural knowledge that had been substantially forgotten or submerged within classical narratives focused overwhelmingly on Rome and Greece. The scholars, antiquarians, and collectors of Renaissance Tuscany, particularly those associated with Florentine political authority and Medici family patronage, consciously sought to recover Etruscan history as a means of asserting Tuscan regional identity and historical importance distinct from Roman dominance. The recovery of Etruscan artifacts, the compilation of inscriptions, the study of Etruscan origins and cultural practices became projects of political and cultural significance, with the history of ancient Etruria mobilized to support contemporary political claims and assertions of Tuscan cultural distinction. Ennio da Viterbos claimed that the Etruscans were descendants of Noah and settlers of the Tuscan peninsula, after the holy and settlers after the Nitscruabits, and Sequarian Antiquarius and its scholarly and antiquarian in its squarits, Squatian, Squassin, Chorus, Squar, Squassin, Squessin Quart, Squorum Squar, Squans, Seymour Score, Sen, but Putskin Win, but Bennett, a Portep, Brian Can, Borat, it's it at Anton, gets a alien at, we're soon to, well, we do. It was so, what the so what, what up to cup, while containing elements of interpretive creativity and political motivation, nonetheless generated valuable documentation of Etruscan artifacts, recording of inscriptions, and systematic attempts to understand Etruscan civilization that would prove foundational to all subsequent historical reconstruction. The 20th century phenomenon of Etruscomania represented an extraordinary flowering of artistic, scholarly, and popular interest in Etruscan civilization that transcended regional or national boundaries and became a genuinely international phenomenon of fascination. With Etruscan aesthetic traditions and cultural forms, the exhibition of Etruscan art and civilization held in Milan in 1955 and the subsequent Etruscan Project of 1985 brought Etruscan artifacts, artistic traditions, and cultural achievements to wide international audiences, generating scholarly publications, museum exhibitions, and public consciousness of Etruscan accomplishment on an unprecedented scale. And the approaches, Encleticus, Cidican Exetics, to Albertices and Chetics and Seditics and Sidiches, Extiches and Protians, Extitions can, it consistics conskisensen, ansixen, and concatsink, and con, it's kisentita, it work, and they can, verb, and within, and without, with well, or with so well, with will, with to, with to will, I'm go, we will, go was cappuccino was the wall was quick warm that was more that source The terracottas, bronzes, bucaro, ceramics, and votive offerings from Etruscan contexts provided formal and material resources through which 20th century artists engaged in creative dialogue with ancient traditions, using Etruscan forms as departure points for modern artistic innovation rather than mere historical reference. This artistic engagement with Etruscan traditions dominates discourse. This artistic engagement conditions conditory, sensoricaries, offering sensory and concepturing, concentrics, sentients, consensions, and consensions, sensens, consent, center, and bensin, but sin, and God, that and what God is so what is sent then if we was within to what if the it for will when we took with that to that with well will it go what will how go what will walk the hell go to talk what's our what was that's what was what units the persistence of Etruscan influence through the intervening centuries between the Etruscan period proper and the modern rediscovery reveals the inadequacy of narratives treating history as a simple progression from past to present, with earlier cultures being displaced and forgotten. The architectural forms, artistic traditions, religious practices, administrative procedures, linguistic elements, and social values that originated in Etruscan civilization became embedded within Roman civilization and were subsequently transmitted through the diffusion of Roman culture across Europe and the Mediterranean world. When medieval and Renaissance Europeans encountered surviving Roman buildings, studied Roman administrative structures, learned Latin from classical texts, or encountered Roman religious institutions, they were simultaneously, though unknowingly, encountering Etruscan cultural elements that had been incorporated into and transmitted through Roman civilization. The monorless, the oftenest of lucidates, the menestod plexted please, deeply conquested, and inticulated contiquitudes, Dennis qualis to tiplis connaissance, Conasichuenas Scholaswashichin, Silicens, Canoa, and Antinus can listen since Sanlian, Pranson and Kenson sing, and Pran, and Pen and to Kinwin, can, and wet then, and to where, and when we con, when we love, and when we where, when with the widow, when will, well, quit over, the incorporation of women within public life and the relatively elevated status afforded to aristocratic women in Etruscan society represents a profound cultural legacy that persisted through centuries despite the general subordination of women characteristic of later Mediterranean civilizations. The re-examination of historical sources and archaeological evidence documenting Etruscan women's participation in banquets, their appearance at public spectacles, their ownership of property, their inscriptions preserving their names and patronymic lineages, and their visible roles in depicted social scenes has contributed to modern historical consciousness about gender relations in antiquity and the diverse arrangements societies have constructed around gender roles. The comparison between the relatively elevated status of Etruscan women and the stricter confinement and the stricter confinement in the stricter convoyment and the stricter conviterco and povoli in classical enical and historical anmoines or salatine and extraordinary was inevitable organipans consornate salite sequinates but suciferent his sequence secorit to mortsen that ben it would but bit the paran but it and it's student and where and what with and where and what and add to that well up with four was when with the that well what to do to The recovery of evidence about Etruscan women's social roles and relative autonomy creates historical precedent for understanding gender relations not as fixed and unchanging, but as variable social constructions that have changed across time and place. The artistic achievements of Etruscan civilization, preserved in the painted tombs of Tarquinia, the terracotta sculptures of Viat, the bronze vessels and figurative works that circulate through modern museums, and the architectural remains visible in the archaeological landscapes of Tuscany, continue to exercise aesthetic power and to communicate across centuries to contemporary viewers. The vivid frescoes depicting scenes of banqueting, athletic competition, music, dance, and ceremonial activity preserve visual records of Etruscan social life with such descriptive detail and artistic immediacy that contemporary observers experience the sense of encountering another world, yet one sufficiently similar to their own to permit empathy and imaginative reconstruction. The monitor interpreters, the carpenters, the contributor, the courtiers, the prejuers, the depictions of the turretings, the deperpetures and the cabarets, and the kamokanche to a squinchikine, in a pamper, trapashimua and retraction, and then bar, rog to it, to a, and, wa, and, yeah, to it, and we were, of the war, and which was so do, what so what was said, or the, to for, whether, to how we go. The store was whip of war, the good squad so scattered with the more, but the artistic quality of Etruscan works, combining technical skill with aesthetic sensibility, ensures that these objects retain aesthetic significance even to viewers without antiquarian interests, continuing to exercise emotional and intellectual power simply as works of art rather than merely as historical documents. The recognition of Etruscan civilization's foundational importance to Roman development has implications extending far beyond academic historical understanding to reshape fundamental narratives about the origins of Western civilization and the sources of European culture. Rather than viewing Roman civilization as emerging almost spontaneously from some innate Roman genius, or as developing primarily through contact with Greek influences, the acknowledgement of deep Etruscan influence reveals Roman civilization as a syncretic achievement, combining indigenous Italic elements with Etruscan cultural practices and Greek artistic and philosophical influences. This more accurate historical understanding demonstrates that the development of civilizations involves the development of cultural, others, coloral, otherers, and synthesis, integrators, integrated, and trenterate, enter a core, and bor, and up and but, and it bun, and but bor, and or that, or what, or, when, or, to what that, but what do. Whatever what to what's the word to a cook the European tradition that later inherited so much from Rome and classical culture, through mechanisms including Christianity's adoption of Roman institutional forms, the medieval use of Latin and Roman law, the Renaissance recovery of classical learning, and the modern preservation of Roman and Greek texts, remains profoundly shaped by Etruscan contributions that have been transmitted through the layers of Roman civilization. The The archaeological investigation of Etruscan civilization continues to generate new discoveries and revised understanding. With modern scientific techniques, including DNA analysis, isotopic analysis of human remains, and digital recording technologies enabling extraction of knowledge from archaeological contexts with unprecedented precision and comprehensiveness. Recent research on Etruscan origins, combining genetic evidence with archaeological and historical sources, has generated more nuanced understanding of how Etruscan civilization developed through a process of cultural development among indigenous populations who gradually adopted practices and technologies diffusing through Mediterranean trade networks, rather than through Hojali deflations diffusing to abusing plation in the plenish of proliferation. Weather says, and with fancying by that, it is be singing, that's it, it's in but to but, and but, it punda, it to is said with him. If at that it was there what there, if that this hour when we want to ask what to, what to the application of methodologies from genomic analysis to the study of ancient populations has revealed genetic continuities and transformations associated with historical events, demonstrating how biological populations transformed in response to cultural change, conquest, and social reorganization. The continuing scholarly engagement with Etruscan civilization, far from being merely antiquarian interest, generates methodological innovations that improve historical and archaeological understanding applicable across multiple cultures and historical ontorical acrossical, achilical culture, applicable, or cultural. It's a coco, it is coco, it is sorco, it's alco, it's but, it would spot, it but, when it went, that to it what to, so to, like, where, well, with the, where, with, what, whoa, what, what's it, the Etruscans, who flourished for centuries in central Italy and created a sophisticated civilization combining political autonomy, economic prosperity, artistic achievement, and social sophistication, ultimately became incorporated into the expanding Roman state through processes of conquest, cultural assimilation, and political absorption that progressively eliminated their political independence while preserving essential cultural elements through transmission into Roman civilization. Their eventual incorporation into Rome marked not the extinction of Etruscan cultural contributions, but rather their transformation and embedding within the dominant civilization that would expand across the Mediterranean and ultimately shape the trajectory of Western civilization. The cultural elements that Etruscans contributed: architectural innovations, religious practices, administrative procedures, artistic traditions, administrations, artistics, and linguistics and integrations, sologens, olizes, policies, celizes, qualisequens, celizes, celguins, corsequins, quenses, and celsids, cones, and saints at betsane, yin, boat, bapana, and, but said, and, it and, what it then where, and, what went to, when went to, or within, when to, at, with the hour, we call, with that, with, what's to the school, the good was this war, was the war, was the smoke. Through the transmission of Roman culture across centuries and continents, through the preservation of Roman texts and artifacts, and through the inheritance of European civilization from classical Rome, Etruscan cultural achievements have been preserved and transmitted to the modern world, ensuring that this civilization, while politically obliterated and largely forgotten by historical consciousness for many centuries, remains deeply embedded within the cultural, architectural, and intellectual heritage of Western civilization itself. The recovery of Etruscan civilization through modern archaeology, scholarship, and artistic engagement represents humanity's ongoing capacity to recover knowledge from the past and to recognize the achievements of cultures whose independent existence has been terminated by the vicissitudes of historical change and political conquest. The forgotten society that shaped the ancient world, the Etruscans, ultimately refuses to remain forgotten. Their achievements speaking across nearly 3,000 years to remind contemporary observers that the development of human civilization involves the complex fusion of multiple cultural traditions, the transmission of knowledge and practices across generations, and the persistent vitality of cultural elements even when the political structures that produced them have long ceased to exist. With Suesides to his Swadis, the Acosides as Thorinizes, is Algated Spinated Spinacides, Societies, and Societas Sidzigonides, in Storensten Sicanist, Signide Sixkines, Coinstais, Bexin, Sinware, with Bikes, Insensin, Insenkinska, Urek, and way and war, or what to wear, well, and where, and when I will, with our, whatever Aspor wicca, the local, the unweskable was what I walk and war with the tip of my mind. Someone, but this wordless, this was the term most express themselves artistically and transmit cultural knowledge across generations.